So it's been about 2 months since Toy Story 5 was announced, and it's a movie that's been met with a lot of trepidation and cynicism.
I'm of the belief that Toy Story 5 has narrative potential. Just as Toy Story 3 gave us what many refer to as the perfect ending, Toy Story 4 seemed like it would be unnecessary to many. But what we got ended up creating a lot more nuance and depth to Woody's character, and the existential implications of the franchise. I think it wound up providing a more thought-provoking and substantive thesis to the Toy Story saga. It answered questions that I previously pondered on. It explored the positives and negatives of the toy and child relationship, and offered a logical solution to the idea that toys would be caught in an endless cycle of being passed from one child to the next, and showed alternatives to the toy lifestyle for toys that found difficulty finding their place in the traditional toy lifestyle. But looking back at all these movies, the main core persisting themes are that of abandonment, friendship, moving on, letting go, and metamorphosis. Ever since the first movie, the toys are panicking about being replaced when Andy's birthday party is coming up. We see that the toys live in fear, and no one exemplifies this better than Woody. He needs to feel loved, to feel valued. Each film in the series is Woody overcoming a different facet of this pandemonium he feels. It takes the form of jealousy, mortality, letting go, and finally moving on and finding his own purpose in life outside of just loving someone. He overcomes his fear of abandonment. He's no longer neurotic and panicking about every little flaw he has. He's not worried about having the spotlight, as evidenced by his behavior towards Forky. Where he used to panic over losing his hat or getting a tiny fixable arm rip, now he willingly gives away his badge and his pull string, his main source of communication for a child, devaluing his worth as a shiny collectible. He used to break down in tears at the idea of being a lost toy, and now it's become his salvation. He's loosened up considerably, and I think Woody by the end of Toy Story 4 is the most transformative version of Woody we have seen. I can't see this character behaving the same way he sometimes does in the previous films, being all frantic and unsteady and flailing his limbs about. So in that sense, it feels like his character arc is complete, but I do think there's more we could explore. So I mentioned Toy Story 4 providing more nuance to the series. Well, I think Toy Story 5 can do the same. At the end of Toy Story 4, we of course saw Woody part ways from all his friends, his family really. He left them to pursue a new life. It's a common part of life. It's part of growing up as a person. You usually don't keep the same people around you all your life. It doesn't invalidate that friendship, it's just part of maturing. People's priorities shift. People become unhappy where they are, or have a romantic partner, or a job opportunity elsewhere. It's a part of life to accept and watch your friends leave. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with a sense of sadness and uncertainty. So here's where I'm going with this. At the end of Toy Story 4, when Woody says goodbye to his friends, they really don't have much time. In fact, they really don't get to say a word to each other. It's all done very quickly. In fact, if you go back and pay attention to the duration of Woody seeing his friends and making the clear indication that he's going to be staying with Bo, they have less than 1 minute to say goodbye. Now think about that for a minute. Imagine that you leave all of your friends and family all within under 1 minute, and you didn't pre-plan this. None of your friends or family had any time to process this before it happened. It'd be quite a shock to the system. And on top of that, you have less than a minute with them before you part ways. Furthermore, the toys don't even realize that part of the reason Woody wants to stay with Bo is because he feels a sense of purpose, helping out other toys find children as a lost toy. So they don't even know the full scope of why Woody is doing what he's doing. And this isn't just a normal parting of ways. When people in real life move on with their lives and move away, there's a presumption there that you're always going to see them at some point again, even if not at a regular interval as before. With the toys, this is not at all an inference. They have no reason to believe they're ever going to see each other again. They don't know where the carnival is going, if it'll ever be back in the town they were in, if they'll be back in said town, etc. It's far more likely in that situation to believe that they'll all never see each other again. Now imagine how the toys would feel after that. Of course, they feel a sense of pride and happiness for Woody initially, and it's not to say that feeling would ever go away for them, but imagine the sadness that would permeate through their lives. Woody was their leader for a very long time, their close friend, their family member for years. And think of how tumultuous the lives of these toys are. They live in uncertainty. They never know when there's going to be a yard sale, when one of them will break or be donated or thrown away. They sort of have to form this kinship and this bond. One that I think would be more intimate than a human could really comprehend, or at least intimate in a different way. And then all of a sudden, one day, one of their biggest confidants is just gone. That's quite an emotionally significant predicament. Now, I'm not proposing this idea of, oh, Woody is a traitor, he shouldn't have left his friends. No, Woody's character arc and his choice in Toy Story 4 should not be undone under any circumstances, but I do think the implications of it could be explored in a way that's narratively fulfilling, in a way that doesn't rob Toy Story 4 of its ending and its emotional potency. So earlier we talked about abandonment, and how Woody overcame that fear. How Woody's arc is seemingly complete. Well, I think there's more to explore here. Woody might have overcome that fear of abandonment, that aching feeling when he couldn't really let go of Andy and find a new purpose. But how does he react when he is now, figuratively speaking, Andy? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, Woody was always scared of being left, or not being valued, or not being enough. He was afraid that Andy would toss him aside for Buzz. He feared what would happen after Andy grew up. He feared being left, like how Jessie was left by Emily. And who would be more affected than Woody leaving than Buzz Lightyear himself? I think this would be a fascinating story and one that's true to life. Something people can relate to, a quality that all of the other films had. Woody essentially had his coming-of-age story. But what's the collateral of a coming-of-age? What happens when you're face-to-face with your old life? What happens when two people who used to be inseparable, best friends, meet after many years of not seeing each other? I envision a scenario where it's been years since Toy Story 4. And Buzz still feels a bit lost. He still misses his best friend. One way or another they reunite, and as per usual there's probably some adventure sprinkled in there. But through that adventure, Woody and Buzz and all the toys reconnect, and Buzz is perplexed at Woody, who's loosened up so much through the years, who seems a bit different now, who's maybe even more adventurous and daring and action-oriented than Buzz is now. We all saw how the lost toy life changed Bo Peep. Imagine how it could change Woody. It would actually be a really interesting full circle moment where we flip the first movie on its head. Now Buzz feels like old news and inadequate compared to Woody, because Woody found this purpose, dared to take that change, and has had so many adventures and seen so many things, and Buzz feels so boring by comparison, having that typical toy life that might seem a lot more banal and mundane. And Woody sees how Buzz is kind of down about these things, and maybe he even starts to second guess himself and wonder if he made the right choice at the end of Toy Story 4. Maybe he feels bad about how Buzz feels because he's been in Buzz's shoes. Woody might have overcome that fear of abandonment, of inadequacy, of feeling useless, but now he has to grapple with the fact he's caused someone else to feel that way. I just think it would be a very fascinating story about friends reconnecting, about how people change after moving away or trying new things, and how it affects your friendship after reconciliation. Now, as to where this whole plot would lead ultimately, I'm not sure. I think it'd be pretty boring and pointless if it was just Buzz having identical art to Woody in Toy Story 4, so I'm not proposing that Buzz has this exact sort of coming of age and becomes a lost toy as well. Maybe more so that he learns not to feel inadequate, to not feel that loss, to come to grips with what happened in Toy Story 4. That he has his own merits, and doesn't have to feel like he's less than just because his life isn't as exciting as Woody's. Now, I'm not sure what the status quo for this movie could be by the end. It could be every toy is a lost toy, every toy has a new purpose now, the toys all go back home to a child, who knows. But I'm honestly not against the idea that Woody and Buzz and the gang are no longer separated. The toys going back to Andy would feel like a regression, yes, because the whole arc about Andy going away was embedded in the idea of letting go of something. The arc in Toy Story 4 was more about change and finding new purpose. Woody and Buzz's separation was more of a consequence of said change. I do think there needs to be a time skip or something to retain the emotion of Woody's departure. It should be made clear that Woody and the gang aren't going to see each other for a very long time. There's a lot of ways you could play around with this idea too, like maybe Buzz and Jessie are having an argument or something, or going through a rough patch, and Woody hasn't seen them in years. So he doesn't really know how to handle it, but their old friend manages to get them through it, and they remembered why they valued that friendship and Woody so much. I also think that despite the iconic status of Woody and Buzz's friendship, they're separated most of the time in the sequels. Toy Story 4 was the most they ever stayed together on screen for an entire sequel, and even then they were split up fairly often in the movie. I think it'd be interesting if they reunited halfway through or something and are together for a more significant chunk compared to the other sequels. It could be the most Woody and Buzz-centric film since the first Toy Story in that respect. But more or less, that's my pitch for Toy Story 5. A movie about rekindling, seeing old friends you haven't seen in a long time, and grappling with how you've changed and how you now react to the people you used to know. Because yes, Toy Story has taught us that relationships are still meaningful even if they're finite, that people move on, that people change, that it's inevitable, that you're not going to be around the same people all your life, and you're going to go through that metamorphosis. But another thing that's true in life is that sometimes you revisit your old ways. Sometimes you do reunite with people you love, and sometimes it's not easy. I think that would be a very fascinating story for Toy Story 5.